The artifact displayed is made of gold, black jet, 27 seed pearls, glass, and blonde human hair. It is oval in shape and 1.5 inches wide, 2 inches long, and approximately a quarter of an inch thick. Placed on top of the black jet is an ornate design centered around a lock of human hair. The lock of hair is located in the center of the object, tied together with a tiny piece of brown string. The hair is held in place by an oval piece of glass. Around the glass and set with gold is 27 seed or small pearls. Surrounding the pearls is an ornate design of swirls in gold. On the reverse side of the object is an inscription stating, "In memory of George Bryan, 1850, aged 30 years," as well as 1342 written in black ink, noting the park's artifact identification number. Attached is also a pin mechanism, straight pin and clasp. This item is known as a mourning pin, also known as a brooch.
Hello and welcome to Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. I'm Ranger Amanda, and today I'm meeting you here at the Parks Museum in the Visitor Center. We're specifically in the middle of the museum at the medical exhibit. In this medical case, or the exhibit case, we actually have some information about doctors and nurses that worked here, as well as hospitals in the local area and the medicine used during the American Civil War. There are a variety of artifacts in the exhibit as well, specifically a surgeon's kit, which was made out of wood. It's a box that holds things like saws and probes and tourniquets, all inlaid inside this box, which has velvet to keep everything secure and protected as it's transported. In addition, we have 3 glass jars that actually held medicine during this time frame. There's also a small mini ball, which actually looks like a piece of white glob because that mini ball changed colors with oxidization. It's lead, and so it is a white in color because of that oxidization, and it's actually hit an item, so it is not the shape it was originally formatted in. In addition to that, we have a piece of mourning jewelry. This was an item that was worn by an individual to remember the lost loved one that they had. And so it actually is what we're going to talk about today. Now, in the Victorian era, which was most of the 1800s, you're going to have a very strict regimented type of mourning process or grieving process. And it was very strict rules that society adhered to. Now, it did depend upon your social class, your economics, your religion, your location that you lived in, and those kind of local practices and things of that nature, how specific things would go. But this grieving period was done by the entire household, including the servants that may live in that home. Now, it did depend upon a man and a woman the amount of time for the grieving process. Grieving could take place for a length of period for 6 months up to 2 years. Women were very strict on what they could and could not do, and so you would have this more elaborate system, and as time passed and you got closer to the end of that grieving period, the restrictions would be lessened on what they could and could not do. Men, on the other hand, weren't quite as strict on their rules. For an example, a woman might be required to mourn the loss of a loved one for potentially a year or longer, where if a man's wife died, he might only grieve for her for up to 3 months before he was out in society. So it really depended upon even someone's gender. There were always exceptions to the rule, however. For example, during the American Civil War, women weren't supposed to go out into society for a good 6 months or more while they're mourning the death of, say, their husband. And so, but if they are going to an event to help raise money for charity, to go towards the cause, go towards soldiers, or maybe orphans of those soldiers, something of that example, they could go out into society because they were doing it for charity, and they were not going out into society to show themselves and to go to the actual formal party. So there was some exceptions to those rules that you have. Now, when we think of grieving and mourning, we think of the color black, and colors played a large role in how the grieving process was taking place. Black is the absence of light, and it was also shows not only the absence of light, but also the fact that they no longer had joy in their lives for that time that they were mourning the loss of their loved one. So black was a very important color. Women would literally wear black from head to toe. They would have coverings over their face of black crepe all the way down to their toe. Their undergarments would still be traditional, but everything on the outside is going to be a very dark color. As the mourning process went along, they're going to be able to add some more items of normalcy back into their lives, and they might not always wear black. So the colors would gradually get lighter and go more towards what they had originally. So you might see grays and purples and lilac and mauve and these darker, richer colors. Oddly enough, even the color white could be used as part of grieving clothing. And so you do have this strange array. Clothes could also be a solid color or even a pattern. So you do see a variation in items. Wealthy women might go out to a dressmaker to have their mourning clothes made for them, where middle class, or the individuals we think of middle class, and even the poorer individuals might take an item that is a darker fabric and dye it into black, or they might change something they already have or make their clothes from at home. So you have a variety within society in that aspect as well. In addition to clothes, the jewelry an individual wore is also going to be muted, so that you're not going to have this elaborate, flashy diamonds and just something that is more out in the open and kind of screams, "Look at me." You want to have those more muted colors and tones. And so even that is going to be represented in the jewelry you wear. You might see items be rings or necklaces or brooches, just a variety of things that can be used during this time frame. Here in our case, in our collection, we have a brooch. So it's going to be a pin somebody's going to be wearing. Now, one of the items that they're going to use in order to make this jewelry is going to be human hair. That's right. They would keep a lock of human hair in order to remember their loved ones. This was sometimes the only memento someone had of the deceased loved one, and it was very, very precious to them. Some of the jewelry was very ornate, where there was a lot of hair involved, and it was woven in a way you would never know it was actually human hair. Others, like the item that we have here in our museum, is literally just a little lock of hair that's tied together with a small piece of string. So you have this variety within the mourning jewelry itself. So you see this elaborate system. Now, mourning jewelry is going to be used from the 17th century on, and it really gets a firm grasp in the 18th century, or sorry, the 19th century, the 1800s, and it has this resurgence, especially when Queen Victoria of England, her husband and her mother died very closely together. And so you have this change in society. And of course, during that same time that was taking place in England, we have the American Civil War. So this is something that people are really going to gravitate to. Now, you can have a professional jeweler actually create this jewelry for you. It could have gold, black jet, two items that were very expensive. As commercialization came along and you end up getting some of these items being more mass produced, they're going to use imitation jet, just something that's darker so that more average people can use these items, where you don't have to be so wealthy to have really nice jewelry. So they were going to make it ornate and special for them to keep their loved one together. Now, as time passes and you get closer to the 20th century and especially the late 19th century, this fashion really falls out of practice. They really don't like this idea anymore. Traditions for grieving really change as a whole. Society just changes in how they grieve overall. And so mourning jewelry really loses its effect that you see during the 1800s, especially the mid-1800s. Now, the interesting thing about mourning jewelry is it wasn't just for grieving. People would keep this more as a remembrance of that individual. They might have inscriptions and more memory of, but they also have other traditions that come along during the Victorian era that we still use today. One of which is engagement rings, wedding rings. Those are some of the items that they would keep. Soldiers would take their regimental badge and kind of make that into a brooch to remember folks. There were items, and I will probably mispronounce this, called a mispub ring or a friendship ring to note friendship and camaraderie. So just because these items of remembrance are mostly tied to grieving and sadness, there are some items that were still used that were for happiness and joyous occasions that they wanted to have a happier note to recognize. So things that we still use today that are very similar, very common, obviously we're still using wedding rings, engagement rings today. Nowadays you might have a friendship necklace or a bracelet, something to remember your friend. And don't forget, some things have changed and are coming back. I've even seen where they will have rings where you can keep some of your loved ones, or not rings, but necklaces where you can actually keep some of your loved ones' ashes close to your heart. So sometimes traditions come back around with some variations depending upon what they are. But that's what we have here at Kennesaw, is the mourning brooch here at Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please stay tuned to Facebook to see more of our programs and to find out more about the artifacts here at Kennesaw Mountain. Thank you and have a great day.